Let's get in. William Lee, Chief Economist and Executive Director at the Milken Institute now. He joins in. Thank you very much for joining in. You know, if you look at the chronology of events over the last 3 days, the first offensive, perhaps you could say, was from China, restricting the rare earth, then the retaliatory measure from Donald Trump imposing the tariff, and then again a softer tone. What do you think China's response is going to be? Will it signal escalation or de-escalation? And will the markets take the events of the last 48, 72 hours in its stride?
I think Prashant was really accurate when he said that there was complacency in the market, but he was wrong to say it was tariff complacency. I think it was China complacency. The markets have been buying into these little minor victories that have been achieved in Madrid and London, where a deal about TikTok was considered a major victory, when the real game was supposed to be about rare earth supply and sustaining that, having China open up its markets, allowing China to be really part of the negotiations, serious negotiations, as to where the future technology, future AI is going to be. Those are the serious negotiations that we were so-called given frameworks for, but no agreements. And I think the markets had taken those very, very complacently. And I think now the market is waking up and saying, hey, there is no agreement with China outside of maybe TikTok. And even there, the U.S. has agreed to allow its citizens to be addicted to a Chinese algorithm. So there again, I'm somewhat dismayed by how the Trump negotiators, Secretary Bessent and company, are taking these really small victories, what they call victories, and letting go the big picture.
William, just one thing though, right? The restrictions from China, morning, but you know they're not aimed at the U.S. in that sense. They're aimed at the U.S., but basically it hits everyone else as well. So for example, the restriction on exports of equipment needed to manufacture batteries for electric cars. You know, as I understand it, it's actually pretty damaging for companies here in India as well. They're saying, well, we will license one off, but no one really expects those licenses to come or be approved. Your thoughts, William?
Precisely. I think China is trying to maintain its monopoly control over those new technologies that it worked so hard in the last 10 years to achieve a leading position in. This was all about Made in China 2025. These were exactly the strategies put in place 10 years ago by President Xi to say, we want to control the standard setting, the license giving of these new technologies. And that's exactly what's being done. And they're demonstrating they're serious about that. And that's why I said the negotiations should have really addressed that head on. Jensen Huang was pleading with everyone, saying we've got to allow U.S. companies or somehow get U.S. companies present in the marketplace for selling AI technology. If we don't, China truly will carry out its Made in China 2025 policy and dominate the world, including in India.
All right. Hi, William. That's what I want to come back to India then. Where does this place India, going that, Trump is going after China a little bit more now. Those markets have had a good run. For the Indian markets, we have been underperformers. Do you think there is a case that from here on, we could see some kind of an outperformance? The flows seem to be turning the corner with regard to the FIs. Domestic liquidity is good. And we've done quite a bit on ground with regard to the fiscal policy as well as on the monetary front. Your take?
India clearly has to get its own house in order. It has to put in place the infrastructure that's needed to advance the economy, especially in the high-tech areas. The supply chains have to be set in a way that's durable, but part of that requires the supply of materials that come directly from China. And there, I think President Modi is going to have a very tough game to play, which is to say he's got to cozy up to China and say, we're really your friends. And he's doing the same thing to Russia, and at the same time, not alienate U.S. and more importantly, U.S. investors that are so interested in investing in India. So India is in that middle position where it needs to secure its supply to ensure that it has a significant position in the production of new technologies, which require a lot of China inputs, but it also requires a lot of American and Western inputs as well. And that's the balancing game that I think is going to be the future for India and how it's going to be able to negotiate those tough currents.
William, any particular, any asset classes or commodities or anything in particular which you think see an outsized move from here. We've had many outsized moves. Gold, silver, Bitcoin, oils, of course, lately moved a little bit. What's your sense?
I've been a big champion of the new technologies, especially AI, and its productivity-enhancing properties. I think that's what's a part of the American exceptionalism story. And the U.S. economy in the future is highly dependent upon getting productivity gains in place from these technologies. But I think what we've seen so far in the reaction of the markets is that perhaps all this bubble talk might have some substance, because people are worried that the pricing of the AI technologies has gotten ahead of itself, because we haven't really seen the applications that are productivity enhancing. We see a lot of infrastructure being put in place, necessarily so, but we saw that game before with the internet, where cables were laid and not all of it was used until much lower prices occurred. So I think the real issue now is, if we may see a significant move, but on the downside, because investors might pull back, given the catalyst that this China rare earth supply is giving it, to say, hey, we might as well take our profits and cut back on some of these multiples until we see some real improvements in the applications. And by the way, all the applications that we've seen so far, at least many of them, are coming right out of China. So that's why Jensen Huang's words of warning about we cannot abandon the Chinese marketplace, because the AI innovators, half the world's AI innovators and researchers are located in China. So that's why it's so important for American companies, technology selling companies, to be present in that Chinese market.
Thank you very much, William, for joining in. The high valuations in AI and tech perhaps had made the markets vulnerable for a pullback, and the tariff threat became the trigger. Thank you very much for joining in. Sharp sell-off seen in Wall Street on Friday.